covering, but it's great to have you back in the room. Kia ora. Right, we go straight to item 8. We have Lara and Natasha and Paul. I think Sage. Oh, I'll just wait, sorry, for a couple of minutes, just while the councillors come in online. They've been sent the invite. Yeah, so we just might give them 30 seconds to jump on that link. Who will be kicking off from? Cool. Thank you. I haven't seen them join, but they do have the link, so there'll be councillors joining. Oh, there we go. Got Councillor Leone there. Right. Who's kicking off? Was it Natasha? Yeah. Kia ora.
Morena, everybody. It's good to see you this morning. I'm Natasha Carpenter. I'm the Head of Coastal Management, and I'm joined today by Paul Kleinak, the General Manager, Engineering Assets and Technical Advisory, and Lara Clark, our Principal Coastal Adaptation Specialist. And today we are bringing to you across 2 items, seeking approval of the next 4 of our shoreline adaptation plans. So in this item, the approval of the Tamaki River Inlet and the Highbrook to Whitford shoreline adaptation plan. And I would also, through the chair, just like to table the apologies of Ngaitai ki Tāmaki. Ngaitai have been working with us since the beginning of the Shoreline Adaptation Plan programme, but unfortunately couldn't be with us here today. But just wanted to note that obviously these areas are of high cultural significance to Ngaitai, and we will continue to work with them on completion of these plans beyond the holding statements that you see in the Shoreline Adaptation Plan documents themselves today.
Just pointed at Sandra there. Should.
Is it turned on? Sorry. Yes.
We'll move it along if it doesn't.
There we go.
Thank you.
Okay, so as I said, we have completed 14 plans out of the sequence of 20 across the region. So you can see they're highlighted in green all of the plans that have been approved by this committee to date, and the 2 shaded in blue there for the Tamaki River Inlet and the Highbrook to Whitford plans in blue there quite centrally in Auckland. So this represents plans number 15 and 16 of the series of 20. This is very temperamental. Now, I'm conscious that we have been here for the last couple of committees, so a lot of this information will be very familiar to you. So just a very high-level brief summary of where we're at. The purpose of the shoreline adaptation plans is to provide long-term consistent decision-making for council-owned land and assets in response to coastal hazards and climate change. These are quite different from plans that you see, I think, in this committee in general, being quite operationally focused. So they are there to inform a lot of councils' BAU. And the scope of the plans is complementary to some of the other work programmes across council that manage some of the other areas that I know are of interest to elected members, including in Auckland Emergency Management, where we have the readiness and response, Resilient Tāmaki Makaurau, looking at social equity and community engagement more broadly, and the Auckland Unitary Plan, looking at private land uses and land use planning. The way that the shoreline adaptation plans are presented is essentially to present 4 recommended adaptation strategies over 3 different potential climate change scenarios. So you have the low change scenario, which takes us from the present day situation up to 0.5 metre of sea level rise through to the potential high climate change scenario. And really the philosophy here is that if there isn't that monitored and observed change in climate change and sea level rise, that there isn't that need to switch between the adaptation strategies that are recommended. These also remain living documents to enable that flexibility in terms of how our environment changes and our communities change over time. As I've noted, these are really quite operational plans, so they are really key in terms of how they will be implemented. So there's a lot that can be done with the plans as they are completed from now within existing budgets, and then moving through with the completion of the region, which is very much imminent at this stage, into those future prioritisation pieces and actions. So we have from now the operational decision making, in particular to support local boards' future decision making, to guide our appropriate responses post storms, and some of our operational maintenance, as well as what we have through our existing coastal asset renewals programme, so that we are guiding the correct outcomes for each area of our coast. As we complete all of the plans across the region, this will be the first time that we will have that consistent decision making across the whole of Auckland's 3,200 kilometres of coast. That will support the regional prioritisation of, once we know where we need to continue to protect versus where there is a more pressing need for adaptation priority, what are the associated funding requirements to support those further conversations with communities, which will lead into pilot case studies. So with that, I will hand you over to Lara for a bit more detail on the plans in front of you in this item.
Kia ora. So to orientate us in terms of the plans that are before you with this item today, on the left of the screen there we have the Tāmaki River Inlet or the Tāmaki Estuary, and on the right hand side we have the coastline coming from Highbrook all the way through to Whitford and sort of south of the Beachlands area there. So across these two plan areas, looking at Tāmaki to start with, we have a sort of lower energy coastal environment within the inlet here. We've got really highly valued connections to the coast, enabling Aucklanders to get out on the water from numerous marine and port facilities throughout this area. We've got some really key council reserves and open space areas of high value, Waiōtaiki, the Panmure Basin, Tāmaki, Kia Tātahi or Seaside Park. We've got key portages and we've got some of our key arterial roads which also traverse this area. As we move around the east coast, we've got some really highly valued cultural landscapes. We've got our highly utilised and valued eastern beaches. We've got Bucklands Beach, Howick, Cockle Bay, Mellons Bay. We've got Whitford beaches and coastal pathways. And we've got key coastal roading connections to some of our communities out towards Beachlands and further afield, and some really highly valued coastal walkways where our communities connect with the coast. So in terms of our iwi engagement across these two areas, as Natasha's noted, that remains ongoing in terms of implementation and supporting the connections that iwi have to the coastal areas within these two plan areas. Our community engagement has really focused on those interests along the coasts, our coastal walkways and our connections to the harbour. And in terms of what we've heard from our local boards as well, they've been supportive of the process and keen to think about some of the key infrastructure and parks and coastal connections that they hold. So that's a very sort of high level synopsis in terms of what we have within these areas. And I think we have kept it short and sweet today. So kia ora, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, that's awesome. I don't know how you condense all that amount of work into that presentation, but thank you very much. First question we've got is from Mayor Brown.
Oh, hi. I've read this and the next one with interest, and it looks very good, but I had a bit of trouble working out, are we planning or are we actually doing works? Is the first question.
Kia ora. Thank you, through the chair. So in terms of planning, we're working, I guess it's an unusual process for us working really closely with all of our asset owners. So I'd say it's strategic asset management planning, Your Worship, in terms of we are planning, we're thinking strategically, but we're thinking strategically about how we manage our assets.
I get that part, that's good. But if, say, for instance, a retaining wall needed somewhere or other, what have you, is that kicked off in this thing, or is that another step?
So through the Chair, that this document will support all decision making in the implementation phase going forward. So there's a number of examples of how the shoreline adaptation plans are being used to implement through the Coastal Renewals Programme at the moment. So for example, at Foster's Bay, which is one of the areas that we have coming up in the next item, we have a response there for making good of the existing seawall structure there, which is guided through the Shoreline Adaptation Plan. In other areas, we have, through the Shoreline Adaptation Plan, supported removal and naturalisation of structures, including Stanmore Bay and Browns Bay, where we've actually physically removed structures, and the ongoing operational spend and need to maintain those structures for a more natural response, which is supported by the Shoreline Adaptation Plans.
Okay, so then we get to the costs of those things, which must come out of budget somewhere or other, I'm not quite sure where. And I noticed that we're not doing private property, but when we do public property, there's often a big private benefit. And I looked at the O River seawall, for instance, which added $1 million to 12 people's houses, and they contributed nothing. When we're doing something for the public and there is a private benefit, I would like you to get the idea of going and getting a private contribution for it, because that one there was a walkway along the front, but the fact that people that benefit most of it are the people whose land was there. And so I don't want to miss the opportunity in future. I'm not a keen person on rating the public to give private benefits. Okay, so just, if you don't mind, could you put that into your thought patterns? Thank you, and perhaps report on those sorts of things when we get around to the actual costs of doing things. I'm very happy with what you're doing in terms of planning and thinking about it. It's a good idea. Thank you.
So through the Chair, absolutely, we've noted that direction. We've noted that direction when we shared the case study for the Orewa seawall with respect to the Better Value Projects approach as well. That is factored into some of our thinking in the SAPs as a core piece for what we'll need to work through in implementation. Absolutely. The commitment is when we see that there is a tie between public and private benefit that we need to explore some of those funding arrangements. We absolutely need to explore things like targeted rates, for example. So, thank you.
Good answer. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. Councillor Sayers.
Yeah, I think the Mayor might have really kind of asked my question there, Paul, so it's great to think, about, because everyone need to come through a process, I guess, through elected members and get approval to do that type of stuff, a policy change, I guess, of some type. Yeah, okay. And I don't want to make any assumptions here, but in terms of the costs that when you have to start to put some numbers to implementation, is that likely to come through the next annual plan process or the LTP process? Yeah, and how that works internally, you get that through into the budgets.
So through the Chair, absolutely. There is a process of summarising all of the shoreline adaptation plans once complete and engaging with the governing body and local boards around what that means and what we need to think about and provide for the future. There will be some quite informed discussion and debate, I believe, around that. And you may have heard me speak in some of the years gone by that it's been really difficult to have that conversation without these plans in place, because a lot of the questions we were asked, we simply didn't have the information, the data to fall back on to answer, which areas were most subject to risk in Auckland, which areas should be prioritised, what should we be spending our money on, and how we should be prioritising that spend on which things first. So those discussions are definitely in the pipeline. That'll be for post-election. We're probably a few months away from starting those conversations, but only a few months.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Turner.
Thank you very much. You just explained to us quite how powerful this work is and how it will be taken into account in lots of places. But last meeting where you presented the last tranche of, you said it was non-statutory and therefore had nothing more than just for people to consider. It sounds contradictory to me.
Kia ora through the chair. Thank you, Councillor, and recalling some of those conversations when we brought the previous plans to you. I think when we're talking about the non-statutory nature of the plans, the main direction around those questions, from my recollection, was how it may be applicable to private property and how it may be applicable to resource consent and building consent processes for sort of private landowners as plans that guide what we do in terms of thinking about council asset management. They are really meaningful for us to understand, as Natasha and Paul have just spoken to, what are the priorities, what are some of those potential costs, and how we move forward with that consideration.
Thank you. So then I also heard, I thought last meeting that the Mayor mentioned that the concern about private benefit and people with shoreline assets who have the money to pay for themselves. And I think I remember that you said that under this plan you have identified all private asset in that area, in the riparian sort of area, and you have blanketed that with a no intervention blanket. Is that correct?
Thank you through the chair. So in terms of the way that we apply the no action strategy that we had on the screen earlier, that's really looking at where we have limited council land and assets within an area. We haven't identified every asset on every piece of the coast that may be privately owned or the interests that are held there, but when we've undertaken our process and followed our methodology around the whole coast of Auckland, we've looked at no action for those areas in terms of what's needed to manage risk to council-owned land and assets.
Thank you, but I remember your comment to the Mayor then as being more specific. The Mayor said, I don't want us exposed, if I can remember the words, to ongoing cost, and your response was, no, to make sure that doesn't happen, we have blanketed all private areas with no action, correct, in this proposal?
So in terms of the way that the plans apply, and this is set out in volume 1 of the plans, is that the plans are for Auckland Council owned land and assets, so they're not applicable for privately owned land. I think there's probably a lot of further conversations and exploration to have around that, the benefits that may be attributed to private land holdings, which the Mayor has commented on today, and the role that how we as stewards of council land take actions or manage risk, being of benefit or being of interest to those parties as well. And as Paul has noted, there's lots of further exploration that we're keen to get into with implementation to look at different funding mechanisms and to look at different methods, how we can fund that and how we can be really clear about roles and responsibilities in that area.
Thank you. Last question, Mr. Chair, please. So did I mishear you last time? Because I was sure that your reply, last time I said, so what happens when people go for a consent? Is this the first thing they walk into, even though it's only just a consideration? And I was sure your answer was yes. And yet now you're sort of saying, like, did I not hear you correct when I quote you as saying that we had tagged all private, how I understood it, tagged all private foreshore land as no intervention. If a staffer picks up this thing and has to take consideration and they see private land, will they then attribute that to a no intervention position?
I think maybe I feel through the chair that we have had this discussion a number of times. So to try and put it quite simply, these are shoreline adaptation plans for council-owned land and assets. They do not affect private property. Lara last time gave quite a fulsome answer in that they may still be picked up as part of a duty commissioner's sort of due diligence to look at what council has put there, but it certainly does not prevent a private property owner from doing anything on their own land.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I will say that I think you guys have said this every time it's come to the committee almost, and this is number 19 and 20. Are we six? I can't remember, sorry. But I guess maybe to take us back, and this is for the Mayor too, to take us back to how we did this before and why we kicked these off. Like, if you want to explain the difficulty we had with coastal assets, especially with, you think of Tasman Tempest and even the floods in 2023, but thankfully we'd started this work. But there's been years and years of sort of ad hoc kind of trying to piece together the coast, largely when a local board or a neighbourhood or someone said, oh gosh, this thing's been ripped out due to a storm or degraded. Could you just tell me what would happen before these and why we decided this was really important to do and why it's more efficient?
Absolutely. Through the chair. So this was a process that began post the amalgamation of Auckland Council and was particularly recognised through the Coastal Management Framework in 2017, which really recognised that as we'd come together, all of the sort of legacy parts of council were managing their coastal assets in their own way. That left us with not a very consistent regional picture in terms of decision making. So when we had the January 2018 storm events and some of the other significant cyclones that have come through, or simply just failing assets that through poor maintenance in the past, that has triggered what has traditionally been a bit more of a reactionary response of rebuild it, fix it. And that obviously puts a lot of pressure on Auckland Council in terms of that holistic coastal management piece when we're recognising the impact that some of those coastal structures can have on adjacent areas of the coast or on the beachfront itself when we're looking at those values. So this was really about getting that consistent decision making for the whole of council. If we look back, Councillor Turner, to Huia, we didn't have a document such as this at the time of going through the engagement on Huia Domain at the time that structure was failing. And I think that it would have supported some much clearer decisions around what the community valued in that area and what the appropriate responses were in an equitable regional manner ahead of what we can do now.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bartley.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for this. My question is around growth and the prioritisation that an area would have, or does it have, if it's experiencing and taking a lot of intensification for the city. And I'm speaking in particular of Waitaki, Glen Innes, Tamaki area.
Kia ora, through the chair. That's a great question and something that's come up in a number of different areas, but focusing on the plans in front of us today, we know that coastal connections for some of our more intensive areas of Auckland from an urban development perspective are increasingly important as those areas might continue to accommodate more people. What we've heard from communities today is that they are really valuing the connections that they currently have, and what we've done is identified in these plans for those coastal stretches that there may be the need for future investment and opportunity to support and continue to support those connections. One thing we've also identified when we look at growth across the region is although we may have some areas where we have more intensive growth within our urban environment, the areas that those communities might go to access the coast might actually be a slightly further distance away. So thinking about how those areas support wider communities and which are the areas that we prioritise and where might our communities have those coastal connections might be beyond just the immediate suburbs or the immediate area that they are in as well.
And would this document be the basis of trying to find that further investment for those areas?
Through the chair, I think it's as Natasha mentioned earlier, it's taking that regionally equitable view. It's identifying how our communities might use our coast in our local environment, and that's something that our local boards have been particularly interested in, and then taking that regional view, what are our coastal facilities, our parks, our areas that we need to invest in that have an even wider, usage across the region. So both that local level investment and planning and that regional scale investment and planning as well.
Thank you. And just one more, please, Chair. Is there any interplay between a lot of the feedback coming through from communities about the sedimentation, the runoff from construction and development, pollution, with these plans?
Through the chair, certainly that's been a really key theme identified by communities for the Tāmaki Estuary area, but also a lot of our harbours and a lot of our other coastal areas. They've observed the change. It's something we've heard from iwi and from long-time residents within the communities, and I guess that's something that we can all consider about our coast, that they do change. What are the reasons for that change might vary, and I think it's an important framing for our communities to think about, that we will have further change in the future with climate change. So we've got the challenges of today, and then we've got those challenges that we might face with raising sea levels. And it's not just a focus on one issue, it's thinking about all of those things and thinking about the outcome that our communities want, and what is the most sort of efficient and effective way that we can get there, in terms of what it costs as well.
Thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor. Councillor Williamson.
Yeah, look, thanks. I think Richard's question to you helped me get a little bit better understanding of it, and I'm also pleased to hear that it's just council and not private property. But I've got a couple of things that will just make me feel a little bit more comfortable in voting for this. The first one about the council and not private, there's often a sort of a get your foot in the door and then jam the door wide open because you've got the principle established. Is this likely to spill into private property over time, where, well, you did it for the council land, now we should be doing it for everybody?
Thank you, through the chair. So that's certainly, another key point of community feedback that we've had. There is a lot of interest, both within the Auckland region and nationally, in that, I guess we term it, holistic view of adaptation planning. So council, private, third-party assets. That's something that I know that our Auckland Council teams are continuing to pursue with central government, because I think, as we had raised in previous meetings, there's lots of questions there around leadership and cost as well. So certainly top of mind.
Okay. And I guess probably more, because some of this I find very difficult. I read it last night and I went, phew, wouldn't want to sit and examine some of this. But I guess I would love one day a nirvana to occur around here where we got some contestable advice of what any of the people who were opposed to us. Is there a group of people out there that would be opposed to us doing this? I don't know. And if there are, what are their voices saying? Or is this a pretty unanimous sign-up?
So through the chair, I guess speaking generally, if we're talking about what we're doing with adaptation,
Yeah.
I guess largely we have support from across a spectrum of different perspectives, that we do have a changing climate and we do have a changing coastal environment, and we need to plan for that, because we've got some really shared outcomes that we want. People love the beaches in Auckland, they love the coast, they love that interaction, so I think we've got a lot of agreement in that space. What we do to get there, how much it costs and who pays, tend to be where we have a devolution of different opinions. And in terms of the shoreline adaptation plan program in general, while in response to your previous question, I note that we've got a strong desire to see a holistic process, and that's that conversation with central government, we've had a lot of support for council showing leadership and thinking about assets and being good stewards and thinking about the cost to Aucklanders for maintaining those assets.
But just quick summary, there's not a big group of people that are saying, what the hell are these people doing, and this is disgraceful. I'm not likely to run into it. I've not heard from anybody like that, but just gives me a bit of, when I don't know an issue too well, it's good to know that it's a general consensus of where it's going. Okay, I'm in, count me in.
If I could add to that through the chair, because I think that's a really good question. So the short answer is yes, there's a majority of support for this approach. I think our engagement with communities, stakeholders have shown us that the debate that we're having is around the management response and when it needs to occur. So part of the community may, for example, want a seawall. A part of the community might want something quite different to a seawall. And what we've done is sort of discussed, debated and agreed some of the triggers that would need to be met to enact a management response of X nature. And that's put a lot of people's minds at ease, because we are still dealing with Aucklanders, some of whom of which are fully signed up to climate change and what that looks like. Some parts of Auckland that would like to see council referencing Maybe if the climate changes in a different way or more slowly, what does that look like? And how will that be factored into your management responses? The shoreline adaptation plans make provision for moving with pace if we need to, but more importantly, actually slowing down if that's what the future is telling us we need to do. So,
Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, and the team does do a lot with the local boards too to nuance it. So sometimes they might come out, this is the straight up evidence, and then there may be nuance from mana whenua, from community, from local board who says, actually, this is way more important than this other park or something. Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for accommodating me for one more, just leading on from that. So the change of language that we've talked about from managed retreat to no intervention and all that sort of stuff, that was done to kind of divert people's attention who disagreed, correct? You know, you said you changed the language because you found the original language, without trying to find a better word, inflammatory to some of the community. So I'm challenging you that the change of language indicates that not everyone does agree with you and that you're trying to appease them.
Through the chair, sort of recalling the discussion that we had when we brought the last plans to this committee in response to Councillor Fletcher's question, the change in language was really about wanting to have progressive conversations with people. And so I think inflammatory is a good term to acknowledge there. When we talk about managed retreat, that isn't a great way to start a conversation about what change might look like in the future. So I would say that changing language hasn't been about changing what we might need to think about. It's just making sure that we can actually have a constructive conversation with our communities, identify what matters to them, and actually start having those productive conversations about what we can do.
Thank you, that was a good answer, thank you.
Thank you very much. I won't get you to step back unless there is debate, because then you have to step right forward again. But do I have a mover for this one? Councillor Bartley and then Councillor Baker. Is there any debate on this? Right, all those in favour? Aye. Any opposed? Opposed. Councillor Turner would like his name recorded. Thank you. Now we'll move to